Every 4 years, the World Cup crowns legends the whole world remembers, names we pass down like myths. But one of the greatest of them all, the world chose to forget. Born with crooked legs, he won 2 World Cups, while the world watched his teammate, Pelé. His name was Garrincha, the greatest footballer you've never heard of. In the summer of 1962, at the World Cup in Chile, the greatest footballer alive went down injured. His name was Pelé. An entire nation held its breath, because without him, Brazil was supposed to be finished. And then a man stepped forward. A man with crooked, twisted legs. Legs that doctors once said might never let him walk at all. Over the next 3 weeks, almost single-handedly, he carried Brazil to the championship of the world. Pelé would become a global icon, known on every continent. His teammate? The world quietly let him disappear. This is the story of the greatest footballer you've probably never heard of. This is the story of Garrincha. To understand him, you have to start in a place the world forgot even faster than it forgot him. Pau Grande, a tiny factory village tucked into the green hills north of Rio de Janeiro. In 1933, into a family that owned almost nothing, a boy was born. They named him Manuel Francisco dos Santos. He was so poor that even the date on his own birth certificate is wrong. His father, a textile worker named Amaro, wrote down the wrong day. From the very beginning, the world wasn't keeping careful records of this child. But this boy was born different. One leg was several centimeters shorter than the other, one bent inward, the other curved out. His spine twisted, like the letter S. A doctor examined him and effectively wrote him off. This child, he said, would be lucky to ever walk normally. It was his sister, Rosa, who gave him the name that would follow him to the grave. She called him Garrincha, after a small, scruffy little wren that darted through the village, a broken little bird. Nobody looking at him could have imagined that those same ruined legs would one day humble the greatest defenders on earth. Garrincha grew up barefoot, in the same shirt and the same cut-off trousers, day after day. His childhood wasn't spent dreaming of stadiums or glory. It was spent diving into the river, climbing trees, and chasing those little birds through the brush. And here is the strangest part of his whole legend. Garrincha never actually wanted to be a footballer. He had no grand ambition, no burning dream. At 14, he went to work at the local textile factory, and by every account, he was a terrible worker. Lazy, distracted, always wandering off. The factory kept him on for exactly one reason. He was unstoppable for the company football team. He played for one reason only: joy. Not money, not fame, not tactics. He simply loved the feeling of the ball at his feet and a defender to tease. When a club in a nearby town finally signed him, the arrangement lasted barely 3 months. Garrincha quit and walked home. Homesick for his river, his birds, his Pau Grande. This was a man the game would have to come and find. It would have to chase him. And eventually, it did. In 1953, Garrincha was finally persuaded to try out for Botafogo, one of the biggest clubs in Rio. To test him, they put him directly up against Nilton Santos, the starting left-back for the Brazilian national team. A world-class professional against a bow-legged unknown from a factory village. What happened next became legend. The very first ball Garrincha touched, he slipped clean through Nilton Santos's legs, a nutmeg, on an international on the first touch. Then he did it again, and again. By the end, it was Nilton Santos himself who walked to the directors and told them, "Sign this boy immediately before he plays against us." He made his debut for Botafogo and scored a hat-trick, 3 goals in a 6-3 win. The boy from the factory had arrived, but it wasn't just that he won, it was how he played. Garrincha didn't simply beat defenders, he humiliated them, joyfully. He would dribble past a man, then actually wait, for the defender to recover, just so he could beat him all over again. Crowds didn't just cheer, they laughed with delight. He's often credited with drawing the very first chance of Ole from the stands. He played football like a child in the street, and somehow that made him untouchable. By 1958, Brazil was heading to the World Cup in Sweden, and they almost left their secret weapon on the bench. The coaching staff were nervous. Garrincha was undisciplined, unpredictable, impossible to instruct. It took the senior players themselves to step in and demand that he and a teenager named Pelé be put into the team. The coaches finally relented for the third match against the Soviet Union. What followed has been called the greatest 3 minutes in the history of football. From the opening whistle, Garrincha tore the Soviet defense to shreds. Brazil won the tournament, their first ever world title. And Garrincha, the broken little bird from Pau Grande, was a world champion. But if 1958 announced him, 1962 immortalized him. At the World Cup in Chile, disaster struck early. Pelé, the rising king, tore a muscle and was ruled out. The team that depended on him was supposed to crumble. Instead, Garrincha simply picked the whole team up and carried it on his crooked legs. In the quarterfinal against England, he scored twice. One, a soaring header from a man barely 5'7". In the semi-final against the host nation, Chile, he scored twice again. He didn't just play in that World Cup, he owned it. When it ended, Brazil were champions of the world for the second time, and Garrincha was named the best player of the entire tournament and its joint top scorer. For one shining month, he was, without question, the greatest footballer on the planet. And here is the fact that should have made him immortal. In every single match where Garrincha and Pelé both started together for Brazil, Brazil never lost, not once. 2 of the greatest talents the game has ever produced, side by side, and defeat simply wasn't possible. Pelé himself would say it for the rest of his life. He and Garrincha never lost a game they played together. But the same wildness that made Garrincha impossible to defend made him impossible to save. Off the pitch, his life was beautiful chaos. He drank heavily from a young age, the same cane liquor that had destroyed his own father. He smoked. He loved recklessly, eventually fathering 14 known children by several different women. His passionate, very public romance with the famous samba singer Elza Soares made them the most talked about couple in Brazil. And he ignored money completely, never saved, never planned, taken advantage of again and again. The man who brought joy to millions never thought for a single moment about protecting himself. Then came the turning point that broke him. In a car accident, his mother-in-law was killed. Garrincha never recovered from it. He spiraled. The drinking deepened into full alcoholism, and slowly, cruelly, his body began to betray him all over again. The knees that had carried those miraculous legs gave out. By the 1966 World Cup in England, he was a shadow of himself, slower, heavier, the magic flickering and fading. The little bird's wings were failing. He drifted from club to club, chasing a career that was already over, while the money and the fame quietly drained away. The decline was long, and it was lonely. The man Brazil had called the joy of the people ended up almost exactly where he had begun, poor and largely forgotten. On January 20th, 1983, Garrincha died from the effects of chronic alcoholism, cirrhosis of the liver. He was just 49 years old. But when his body was brought to the great Maracana Stadium, something happened that revealed the truth of who he really was. The crowds came. Thousands upon thousands of ordinary people lined the streets to say goodbye. The same people he had made laugh decades before. They had not forgotten. The world had. And yet, listen to how those who truly understood the game spoke about him. The Uruguayan writer Eduardo Galeano said that in the entire history of football, no one made more people happy. The poet Vinicius de Moraes made him an angel with crooked legs. Pelé called him one of the best there had ever been and said that without Garrincha beside him, he might never have been a three-time champion of the world. In Brazil, the national stadium in the capital, Brasilia, carries his name, not Pelé's, but Garrincha's. And on his modest gravestone, there are no statistics, no trophies, just 5 words that say everything. Here rests the joy of the people. Garrincha was not a perfect man. He was reckless, undisciplined, and in the end, his own worst enemy. But he played football the way children dream of playing it, purely, joyfully, without a single thought for tomorrow. He won 2 World Cups. He never lost beside Pelé. And he made an entire nation laugh in a way no one had before or has since. When we argue about the greatest players who ever lived, his name almost never comes up first. Maybe, after everything, it finally should. The world forgot the broken little bird from Pau Grande. We don't have to. If this story moved you, if you believe legends like this deserve to be remembered, subscribe and stay with us. Because next time, we tell the story of another forgotten legend, the man who scored 13 goals in a single World Cup, a record that, after nearly 70 years, has still never been broken. His name was Just Fontaine. Subscribe. You do not want to miss that one.